I'm Aaron. I'm 29 years old, and I've never been what anyone would call the favorite. I wasn't the golden child, the pride of the family, or even the one remembered for group photos without being reminded. That role always belonged to my older brother, Derek. He's 34, and for as long as I can remember, he's worn an invisible crown. He's the successful one, the married one, the one who gave my parents grandchildren, which, in their eyes, made him the only person who truly mattered. For a long time, I told myself it didn't bother me. I convinced myself I was just quieter, more independent, the so-called black sheep in a harmless way. But there was nothing charming about it. It stopped being tolerable when my parents made it clear, both emotionally and financially, that I was just a background character in a story where Derek was always the lead. When my grandfather passed away, I didn't expect anything. He had been distant for most of my life, a quiet presence who lived several states away and sent the same birthday card every year. Inside was always a short message and a crisp $20 bill. That was the extent of our relationship, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that he had been paying attention all along. He noticed the Christmas mornings when I received socks while Derek's kids unwrapped drones and tablets. He saw the Thanksgivings where I carved the turkey, cleaned the dishes, and still ended up at the kids' table while Derek gave speeches about family values. He noticed the forgotten birthdays, the unanswered calls, and the years I spent building my life from nothing. I worked 2 jobs in my early 20s, earned a degree online, skipped holidays because I couldn't afford the drive, while Derek received loans that were never meant to be repaid. In the end, my grandfather left me something I didn't even know existed, a substantial inheritance. The call came on a Tuesday while I was making lunch. Nothing special, just eggs and toast. My mom called out of nowhere. No greeting, no small talk. She went straight to the point. My grandfather's attorney had called. I was getting a large check. I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. She told me he left me the house and an investment account. Derek, she added, was only getting the boat. Her voice sounded flat, almost bitter. She didn't congratulate me or ask how I felt. After a pause, she said, "You know your brother could use that money more than you. He has kids." That sentence stayed with me for days, as if having children automatically erased everything I had worked for. At that point, I didn't even know the full value of the inheritance. I hadn't spoken to the attorney yet, but clearly my family had. 2 days later, Derek texted me. No greeting, just one line. "You know you owe this to me, right?" I stared at my phone, reading it over and over. Owe him what? I hadn't even processed the situation myself. I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't trust myself to say it calmly. That Friday, I finally called the lawyer, Thomas Gerber. He was polite, professional, and confirmed everything. The house was fully paid off, located in a quiet suburb about an hour from the city. The investment account was worth just under $320,000. Derek received the family boat, valued around $50,000. Generous, but not life-changing. Thomas explained everything carefully, as if he expected a strong reaction. Instead, I sat there stunned. I hadn't spoken to my grandfather in nearly 5 years, yet he left this to me. Not out of favoritism, but because, as his letter explained, he wanted to balance things. The letter was short, only 2 paragraphs. He wrote that he had seen how I was treated, that he respected my independence, and that he was proud of the man I had become. I cried reading it. Sitting alone on my worn couch, holding a letter from someone who understood me better than my own parents. That calm didn't last long. The following week, Derek called me. That alone was unusual. For a moment, I thought maybe he wanted to talk things through. I was wrong. He spoke with clear condescension and told me I didn't need all that money. I was single, no kids, no mortgage. He asked what I would even do with it. I told him it didn't matter. Our grandfather made his decision. He didn't like that. He hung up. Then the messages started coming in from everyone. My parents, my aunt, all saying the same thing. Be the bigger person. Help your brother. Family comes first. It's just money. You'll understand when you have kids. The message was clear. If I didn't give in, I was selfish and ungrateful. It stopped being about money. It became about control. A week later, Thomas emailed me. Derek had contacted the firm and tried to see if the inheritance could be reallocated. The will was solid. There were no grounds to challenge it. Still, the pressure continued. That Sunday, my mom sent a message: transfer it to him or don't bother coming home. No explanation, no greeting. That was the moment everything changed. I didn't argue. I booked a flight, changed my passwords, secured my accounts, and authorized Thomas to handle all communication. I upgraded the security on the house. Then I turned my phone off. When I woke up, I had dozens of missed calls and one furious voicemail from my father. Things escalated slowly after that. Passive comments, guilt, attempts to pull me back into my place. I skipped Easter, and that seemed to push them further. They posted family photos online, all smiles, captions about gratitude and togetherness. I checked those posts not out of longing, but as a reminder of how quickly I was erased. A week later, a real estate agent contacted me asking about listing the house. Confused, I called the office. She explained that Derek had contacted them, claiming to represent me. He had already taken interior photos. I drove to the house the next day. When I arrived, I saw a realtor lockbox on the door. He had changed the locks. I documented everything and went straight to the police. Later that day, I replaced the locks again and installed cameras. I told no one. 3 nights later, the motion alert went off. Derek was on my porch, confused, trying to access the door. He saw the camera and understood. A week after that, I received a certified letter. My parents had hired a lawyer, requesting that I give Derek partial rights to the estate. It was framed as goodwill. My father had signed it. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in my grandfather's old recliner and found a photo of the two of us. I didn't remember it being taken, but I remembered how it made me feel. Seen. When Derek texted again, threatening that this wasn't over, I didn't respond. My aunt later warned me my parents were telling everyone that I manipulated the will. Soon, public posts appeared online accusing me of greed. Even my workplace received an anonymous complaint questioning my reliability due to a legal dispute. That's when I understood this was never about fairness. It was about obedience. And for the first time, I refused to provide it. If you want, it was subtle, easy to dismiss at first, but someone had clearly tried to put my career at risk. That's when I understood this was no longer about the inheritance or the house. It was about control and retaliation. They couldn't accept that I had stood my ground, that I had something they couldn't take. So instead, they tried to scorch everything around me, hoping I'd eventually give in. But I wasn't going to do that. I was finished giving in. What seemed to confuse them most was my response. I didn't react the way they expected. There were no angry messages, no long explanations, no emotional breakdown in the family group chat. I didn't show up at anyone's door asking to be heard. I didn't defend myself publicly or post my side of the story online, which in my family might as well be considered an admission of guilt. Instead, I went quiet. And by quiet, I mean I stepped completely away. My phone stayed on silent. I stopped checking notifications. I deleted Facebook altogether. I even changed my number. Not out of anger, but because every time my dad's name appeared on my screen or Derek's messages came through, my chest tightened. I couldn't keep living like that. I didn't do this because I was strong. I did it because I was exhausted. There's a point where you reach a different kind of emotional low. Not the dramatic kind, not tears or shouting, but a stillness. It's like sitting at the bottom of an empty pool, looking up, realizing no one is coming to help you out. That was me, alone in a house full of furniture that wasn't mine, eating microwave noodles at a folding table because I hadn't had the energy to move anything in yet. The house, my inheritance, didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a battleground. Every room carried a reminder of the conflict I never asked for. The guest room Derek had tried to list online. The living room where holidays were once held without me. Even the front porch, which I started referring to in my head as the lockbox. I stopped talking to them, but the noise didn't stop. Rumors spread quickly. One night, my cousin Brian texted me asking if I was suing my parents. I wasn't. Not at that point. But the story had already grown. I was no longer just selfish. Now I was hostile. The backlash followed. I was blamed for a canceled family vacation, accused of dividing the family, told I was making things uncomfortable for Derek's kids at school. An old high school friend messaged me saying my dad had asked his mother at church to pray for my heart. They had written a story where I was the villain, and I wasn't invited to participate. For a while, it got to me. There were weeks when I barely left bed. I stopped responding to work emails. My boss eventually called to check in. I told him I had the flu. He gave me the rest of the week off. I spent those days watching documentaries and staring at the ceiling fan. One night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My hair was a mess. My hoodie was stained. I looked tired, and out loud, I asked myself if they were right. If I was selfish. If giving everything to Derek would make this easier. If going back to being quiet would fix it. That thought stayed with me overnight. The next morning, I woke up. That was it. I got out of bed, took a long shower, cleaned the kitchen, and ordered a real table online. Not because I had some major realization, but because the world kept moving. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted a different life, I had to build it myself. So I started slowly. I began by renovating the house. I didn't plan to live there forever, but I needed it to feel like mine. I started with the kitchen. I tore out cabinets, watched tutorials, laid tile, painted until my hands cramped. It was slow and uncomfortable, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: control. Neighbors noticed. One of them, Linda, a woman in her late 60s with a small dog and an impressive baking habit, brought me lemon bars and introduced herself. She knew my grandfather, said he used to wave from the porch every morning. We talked for 20 minutes. Nothing heavy, just normal conversation. I didn't realize how much I missed that until it happened. As the house changed, so did I. At work, I found my footing again. I took on a new project, led a few calls. My boss noticed and gave me a raise, saying I seemed different in a good way. I thanked him. I didn't explain that I had stopped carrying a family that never carried me. I handled the inheritance carefully. I didn't spend recklessly. I met with a financial advisor who helped me divide it into savings, investments, and something he called joy spending. I liked that term. I used that portion to book a solo trip to Kyoto. Just me, a backpack, and no schedule. When I told Linda, she smiled and said my grandfather had always wanted to go to Japan, that he'd be proud of the man I was becoming. No one had said that to me before. The silence from my family didn't last. After months, the messages returned, softer this time. Derek asked if we could talk. My mom emailed saying they missed me. No mention of the will or the threats, just vague guilt. I didn't respond. Instead, I placed the photo of my grandfather and me on my desk. The house smelled like fresh paint and lemon candles. It was mine. I was mine. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. A year passed. The house became a home. I named the guest room after my grandfather, Benjamin. Financially, I was stable. Professionally, I had been promoted twice. Mentally, I was clearer than ever. But I hadn't forgotten. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. They tried to take what wasn't theirs because they believed it belonged to them by default. Because Derek had children. Because I didn't. Because I only mattered when I was giving something up. They thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. Silence was preparation. It started when I found an old group photo from Thanksgiving, taken 2 years before my grandfather passed. I remembered setting up the camera myself, running into frame, and being pushed to the edge so Derek could stand in the center. That's when it clicked. They thought legacy belonged to him, but I owned it now, and I knew exactly how to remind them. The first step was the house. I hired an architect, an old classmate named Theo. I told him I wanted to modernize the space while preserving its soul. He understood immediately. He didn't ask questions. He just started working. Nothing feels more like freedom than paying someone up front and not hesitating. The second step was documentation. I began collecting every record, every message, every attempt to take what wasn't theirs. If you want, the will, the property deed, the email correspondence from Thomas Gerber, the police report from the incident when Derek attempted to enter the house, screenshots of my family's social media posts, and the messages from Derek, my parents, and my aunt. I gathered everything and organized it into a digital folder. Each section was clearly labeled: legal, emotional abuse, property dispute, public slander, and online harassment. I wasn't doing this because I planned to take legal action, but because I wanted the option. Power isn't only about money or retaliation. It's about leverage. And when you've spent most of your life being seen as someone who would never push back, nothing unsettles people more than realizing you've been quietly keeping records all along. Step 3 was asking questions. Not to my family, but to the people around them. It started with Linda, my neighbor. She and my grandfather had spent a lot of time talking on the porch over the years. She remembered details. One afternoon, while we were drinking iced tea in her backyard, I casually asked if she knew Derek had tried to sell the house. Her eyes widened immediately. "He did what?" she asked. I nodded and told her he'd brought a realtor by before the will was even finalized. She shook her head and said my grandfather would have been furious. I replied that, in a way, he was. We laughed, but my thoughts were already moving ahead. After that, I began reaching out to people who had known my grandfather, friends from church, an old fishing companion, and even the man at the hardware store who sold him birdseed every spring. Many of them remembered me, some only faintly, others more warmly than I expected. One woman, Mrs. Palmer, who sang with him in the church choir, told me something that stopped me cold. She said he once told her he worried my family would overwhelm me if he didn't step in. She repeated his words exactly. "Aaron is good. Not loud, but good, and good men get run over if no one protects them." That was when I understood. This wasn't only my fight, it was my responsibility to honor what he tried to safeguard. So I started writing. It wasn't a letter of revenge, and it wasn't even meant for them. It was for myself. I wrote down everything they had ever said or done that made me feel small. Every time I was treated like a burden. Every gift Derek received that I didn't. Every chore I handled while they relaxed. Every gathering where I was barely noticed. Every moment I allowed them to make me question my worth. Then I wrote down everything I accomplished despite that. I earned my degree, worked 2 jobs at the same time, paid off my debts, bought my first car, earned promotions, traveled alone, and rebuilt a house from the ground up. The list was longer than I expected. At the bottom, I wrote one final line. I will no longer apologize for who I had to become to survive. I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not because I needed to reread it, but because one day they might. And if they did, I wanted them to know that I remembered everything. The final part of the setup happened almost unintentionally. Theo had finished the blueprints, the permits were approved, and renovations were underway. As we walked through the house one afternoon, he ran his hand along the new stair railing and said the place had history. He mentioned that if it were his, he would give it a name. At first, I questioned the idea. But that night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the fireplace, and the name came to me. The Benjamin House. Simple, understated, and right. It honored not just the inheritance, but the belief he had placed in me. The next day, I filed the paperwork, created a website, and registered the property as a small creative retreat for writers and artists. I booked the first guest for the summer, a friend who needed quiet space to finish her novel. From that point on, the house stopped representing conflict. It became purpose, a way to reshape legacy, my legacy. My family still didn't know what was coming, but they would. I wasn't finished. The housewarming invitation wasn't meant for them, but I sent it anyway. A simple cream-colored card with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to the reopening of the Benjamin House, a creative retreat and legacy home. Date, time, website link, RSVP optional, no signature. I mailed one to my parents, to Derek, and to my aunt who once told me that family sticks together, but not everyone is glue. I knew they'd understand. And yes, I knew it would sting. The reopening itself was modest. About 30 people attended, mostly neighbors, artists, and a few coworkers. The house had been completely transformed. Open living spaces, clean Scandinavian design mixed with warm, original details. My grandfather's old dining table remained, now sitting beneath a vintage chandelier. The back porch had been rebuilt, facing the woods, wrapped with railings and soft string lights. It wasn't extravagant, it was dignified. Above the door, a sign read, "The Benjamin House, established 1957, reclaimed 2025. It said exactly what it needed to say. Derek saw the website first. I know because he messaged me the night before the opening, demanding to know what I had done. I calmly replied that I had turned the house into something that gives back. He read the message but didn't respond. That was fine. The point was never confrontation. It was visibility. Everyone they knew would see it. Church friends, neighbors, longtime acquaintances who still followed family updates online. I had documented the entire renovation process on the website, with photos, updates, and a video walkthrough narrated by Theo. In the opening credits, I included a dedication to Benjamin Moore, who recognized value where others saw silence. A few days later, my mother finally called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying she and my father were disappointed that I had excluded the family and that I had made everything about myself. I saved the message and never listened to it again. I already understood how they worked. Any independence was selfish. Any boundary was betrayal. Any success outside their control was threatening. This time, though, they had none. That was the real victory. Not the money, the house, or the bookings. The fact that they no longer mattered. Still, I wasn't finished. I hired a local filmmaker to create a short documentary for the website and YouTube channel. I told her it was about legacy, about reclaiming it, and about what happens when someone quietly believes in the overlooked member of a family. We filmed for a week, renovations, old letters, family photos, and interviews with Linda and Mrs. Palmer. I narrated most of it, leaving my voice unpolished where it wavered. The final title was The House He Gave Me, A Quiet Inheritance. Within 2 weeks, it reached 20,000 views. Messages poured in from strangers who related to the story, people who felt invisible in their own families. Some said it made them cry. Others said it inspired them to start over. I saved every message, not for approval, but as proof that I wasn't alone. The fallout came soon after. My father's coworker saw the video and shared it at work. My aunt unfriended me. My mother posted vague accusations online. Derek stayed silent until one night when a handwritten letter arrived. He wrote about feeling misrepresented, about protecting family legacy, and then admitted he didn't understand why our grandfather chose me. He acknowledged, quietly, that maybe something had been missed. I didn't respond. Forgiveness doesn't require access. The Benjamin House officially opened for its first full retreat in May. Writers and artists stayed for 10 days. We cooked together, talked on the porch, and shared stories about rebuilding and being heard. One night, a guest told me the place felt like it was created by someone who knew what it meant to be overlooked. She was right. That fall, I planted a sugar maple in the backyard. My grandfather loved those. As the sun set, I thanked him aloud for choosing me. The wind moved through the branches, and for a moment it felt like an answer. In the end, this wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, about becoming the person they tried to erase without asking permission. Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you build. And for the first time, I had built something that would last. If you want